All right, so today we're going to dive into a really profound idea, one that comes from a piece called Life is Larger Than Death.
So let's just jump right in with a big question. Are life and death really opposites? I mean, think about it. What if that core assumption we all kind of have is actually, well, what if it's just a misunderstanding that's born out of fear?
And that makes sense, right? It's totally understandable. For most of us, just thinking about death brings up a whole lot of anxiety. It's just a topic we'd rather not touch. But what if? What if we could just set the fear aside for a minute and approach it with, a bit of quiet curiosity instead?
Okay, so that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to take a moment to really challenge that big foundational assumption we all have about how death and life relate to each other.
So check this out. The source brings up this piece of wisdom from the Christian funeral liturgy. And what's so powerful about this is the reframe. It's not saying grief and loss aren't real, not at all. It's just suggesting that maybe death isn't the final stop, the end of the line. Maybe it's just a change.
And okay, here's where it gets really, really fascinating. This idea, this spiritual insight about change, it's not just off in its own corner. The source points out that the world of science, believe it or not, says something that sounds remarkably similar.
So let's dig into that. Let's look at this incredible point where two totally different worlds, spirituality and science, somehow end up in the exact same place.
And this just lays it out so perfectly. You see, on one side, you've got that spiritual wisdom we just talked about, and on the other, a core principle of physics, the conservation of energy. Right? Energy can't be created or destroyed, it just changes form. They're both pointing to the exact same truth. What's here stays here. It just becomes something else.
Okay, so this shared idea is what leads us to the absolute core argument of this whole piece. And it's so simple, but it is a complete, profound reframe of how we think about life and death.
So here's what we usually think, and it feels intuitive, doesn't it? You're either alive or you're dead. It seems like a simple on-off switch. Life is here, death is not here. But here's the twist. The huge takeaway from the source is this. Death isn't the opposite of life at all. It's the opposite of birth. Think about that. Birth and death are just the two bookends of your time here, but they're happening inside something so much bigger.
So what does that actually mean? It means that life, with a capital L, is this huge, ongoing reality. It's like a giant river. Birth is just when we jump in, and death is when we get out. You and I, we don't create life. We're just part of it for a little while. That river was flowing long before we got here, and it's going to keep flowing long after we're gone.
Okay, so once that idea clicks, what does it feel like? Let's explore how this new way of thinking can completely change our emotional and spiritual reality. And the source looks at this through the lens of the Franciscan perspective.
So think about it. If you really accept this reframe, your entire definition of death has to change. It stops being about annihilation, about being erased. Instead, it becomes a transformation, a passage, a doorway into another way of being.
And this right here, this is the heart of that emotional shift. I mean, how could anyone possibly call death sister? Well, if it's not an enemy that's out to get you, if it's just a natural part of this giant process called life, then your whole relationship to it changes. It goes from being an enemy to, well, to family.
This really sums up the whole journey, doesn't it? On one side, you have the old way of thinking. Death is a brick wall, an endpoint, an enemy you have to fear. But on the other side, with this new perspective, it becomes a doorway, a passage, a sister, and maybe, just maybe, a reason to trust that whole big process of life.
And so, that leaves us with this one last really powerful question to think about. If you actually start to see death not as a wall, but as a doorway, how does that change everything? How does that change the way you live your life right here, right now?